Introduction to VBScript. Welcome to this video series on VB scripting for Windows. So why on earth would you want to script anyway, and what is scripting? Well, to answer our second question first, what is scripting? Scripting is really nothing more than a bunch of commands that have been entered into a text file with a .vbs file extension, which are then executed in order to produce a result. So rather than you having to sit there typing out command, waiting for it to finish, and then typing out another command, and waiting for that to finish, and so on, you can execute the script and have all of those commands executed in order, and then they're all done. Now, if you've ever created any sort of DOS batch file in the past, then this is exactly what we're talking about here, except that scripting on a whole is much more powerful. Alright, now back to our first question, why bother scripting? Can't I just do all this stuff manually? Well, the truth is, yes, you can do all this stuff manually, but why, I'd ask? Sure, if you need to issue a quick command to do a single task right now, then a script probably isn't the answer. But if you need to perform a task that takes a lot of time, or perhaps perform the same task on a number of different computers, then a script might be just the ticket that you're looking for. At the end of the day, there's really only two reasons I can think of why you'd want a script. The first is to save time. Now, time is money, of course, so to save time saves money. Now, if you had to disable a web service from running on 500 servers, how long would it take for you to do that manually? An hour? 2 hours? A day? More? Well, if you'd scripted this, how long do you think it'd take to write the script? Probably less than a few minutes for most scripters. So yes, scripting will save you considerable time over the long run. Mark my words, it will. The second reason that I could think of why scripting should be part of your skills is that scheduling things to happen or run when you want them to is much easier when you script. Let's face it, as an administrator, many of the critical tasks you need to perform, for example backups, are most efficient when they happen outside business hours, so that way you don't disrupt the network from performing at its best. So rather than staying back until midnight to run a series of commands, you can script it and schedule a script to run at midnight whilst you're curled up in bed. Now, you may have your own reasons for watching these series of videos. Maybe you want to be able to script, maybe you're just curious how scripters perform their magic, or perhaps you've been forced to learn how to script. But let me tell you, not only is scripting fun, but it's amazing the control you'll have over your network, and best of all, at least in my experience, the majority of sysadmins I come across simply can't do it. So learning how to script will definitely raise you up a notch as far as your peer respect goes. Now, before we get started here and dive straight into learning how to script, I'd just like to first talk about some of the questions I seem to get a lot regarding scripting, so we'll try and clear up a bit of confusion so we're all starting on the same page. First of all, VBScript is a standalone language which is built into all of the later Windows operating systems from Windows 98 and above, so you don't need to download and install anything, it's already there. Also, don't be confused with the name of VBScript. It's not Visual Basic, it's not VisualBasic.net. Those are totally different programming language, although they certainly have some similarities to VBScript. They are different languages altogether. The other thing certainly worthy of mention is that VBScript can utilize COM. Now, for those of you who don't know what COM is or why it's a good thing that VBScript can use it, COM simply stands for the Component Object Model. Now, when you get started with scripting or any sort of programming for that matter, you'll definitely come to a situation where you've written some code and later on in your script you'll want to use that same bit of code again. COM objects in its simplest form is simply a bunch of code that can be called upon and reused, and these COM objects are generally packaged as DLL files, and no doubt you've seen a lot of these hanging around your Windows system. So say, for example, you want to retrieve a value from the Windows registry. You could use COM to do that because it's already there for you to use. So most of Windows functionality is already been rolled up into these COM objects, and all you need to do is call them and the hard work's done for you. Now, furthermore, if you want to create your own COM objects, you can do that as well. And it's important that you do understand that VBScript's ability to hook in and use these COM objects is really where its power comes from. Practically anything that you can think of doing on a Windows system, you can do by using COM objects, and you'll see more about this as we progress through these videos. Okay, so how does VBScript work? Well, It's rather simple actually. Every line of a script is read in and executed one at a time. So line number 1 in the script has been read and executed, followed by line number 2, then 3, and so on until every line has been run, and then the script will exit. This code is run by the Windows script host, or Wish as it's commonly known, and there are 2 different versions of Wish. The first is VBScript.exe, which is the GUI version of Wish. Now it's not GUI in the sense that you'd normally expect from a fully fledged Windows application, but it does offer the ability to generate output windows with some basic functionality. Now the second version of Wish is CScript.exe, and this is the command line version of Wish if you like, and it outputs the script results to the command prompt. Now since most of the output you're going to want to see from your VB scripts is command line driven, I'd recommend that you use CScript as the default. Now you can choose whichever version of Wish you want to use, whether that be VBScript or CScript, by simply opening up a command prompt and then typing in CScript/h:\VBScript, and that'll set the default Wish version to VBScript, or you could simply change the last part here and remove the VBScript, change that to CScript, and that'll change the default to CScript. Now I'm going to leave the default here at CScript, as that's my preferred Windows scripting host that I want to use. Okay, now the final thing I want to touch on before we move on to the next video, where we'll actually start learning how to script, is the scripting editor that you will use. Now whilst you can start scripting straight away by simply using Notepad, if you're at all serious about scripting, you'll probably find a dedicated scripting editor is well worth the money. So whilst I could simply get away with using Notepad in these videos, I'm going to use a different editor, not because I'm trying to convince you to buy any product, but because some of the good script editors out there will color code your scripts automatically, and that'll help us visually when we're trying to understand scripting. So again, everything that we're going to do in these videos you can do with Notepad, which of course comes free with Windows, but if you're interested in a dedicated scripting editor, I'm not going to play favorites here. I'd simply recommend that you type in script editor or VBScript editor in Google or your favorite search engine, and you'll find a lot of products that will do a much better job than Notepad. Okay, in this video we've touched on what VBScript is and how VBScript can use COM to make your scripting not only easier but much more powerful, as a lot of the code is already written for you to be able to perform most Windows administrative tasks and interface with many applications. Now finally we talked about the 2 different versions of Wish, VBScript and CScript, and we saw how to change the default Windows scripting host so that you can set which one you'd prefer to run your script when you double click on any file with the .vbs file extension. So in the next video we'll actually get stuck into laying down some code so we can start our careers as scripters.